Before we begin, don't forget to hit subscribe for more stories that guide you into a gentle, peaceful sleep. Story 1. The Whispering Garden. There was a place deep in the woods, hidden from view, where people said you could find peace like no other. This place was known as the Whispering Garden. Overgrown with ivy and wild roses, the garden was filled with winding paths that seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning until you couldn't tell where you'd started. Those who wandered in would often say that the garden seemed to breathe, as if alive with secrets long forgotten. And if you listened closely, you could hear faint whispers in the wind, like voices sharing ancient tales. One autumn evening, a traveler named Elena found herself drawn to the garden. She'd been hiking for hours, her body weary and her mind heavy with thoughts that wouldn't let her rest. The sight of the gate, covered in vines, seemed to call her, promising a kind of refuge. Pushing it open, she stepped inside, feeling the cool night air settle around her like a comforting cloak. The light was dim, and the world felt distant, as if she'd entered another realm entirely. As she wandered, Elena noticed the stillness. Not a single leaf rustled, and even her footsteps felt muffled on the mossy path. The silence was peaceful, but then she began to hear something else. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper, like voices carried on a gentle breeze. At first she thought it was her imagination, a trick of the mind, but the whispers grew louder, though never alarming. They sounded kind, like friends sharing secrets under starlight. Elena continued walking, feeling a warmth settle over her as the voices grew clearer. They spoke of things she couldn't understand, fragments of forgotten stories, and words that felt like lullabies. She didn't mind not understanding. The whispers were calming, as though wrapping her in a blanket of sound, each one encouraging her to rest, to let go of the day's burdens. Her steps slowed, and her mind grew quiet, her worries fading like mist in the morning sun. Eventually she came to a clearing bathed in moonlight, with a soft bed of moss that seemed to invite her to lie down. The whispers grew softer, almost a hum now, and Elena found herself sinking onto the moss, her body relaxing, as though the garden itself was urging her to sleep. The gentle murmur of voices continued, surrounding her with a sense of warmth and peace, lulling her deeper into drowsiness. As she lay there, Elena felt herself drifting between sleep and wakefulness, her thoughts softening. The garden's whispers grew even quieter, like a fading melody, as she let her eyes close. In her last moments of awareness, she felt as if the garden was holding her, cradling her like a mother might her child, sheltering her from the worries of the world. The garden watched over her, as it had watched over so many others, a silent guardian of those who needed rest. The whispers continued long into the night, surrounding her with their gentle comfort, their ancient words weaving dreams of peace and forgotten places. Elena slept, her breath steady, her mind quiet, held by the garden's endless embrace. And when she awoke, she would remember nothing but a feeling of calm and the soft, mysterious whisper of voices that had carried her through the night. The garden, ever watchful, ever silent, had given her the rest she needed, and in the morning light, she would leave it behind, carrying with her only the memory of a dream. Story 2. The Lighthouse of Dreams. On a rugged cliff overlooking the sea stood an old lighthouse, its light casting a gentle glow across the waves each night. The people in the nearby village spoke of the lighthouse as if it were a guardian, a presence that kept watch over them, especially during the long, quiet nights. Some even said that if you sat beneath its light, you'd drift into the most peaceful sleep you'd ever known, as if the lighthouse itself was lulling you into dreams. One night, a young traveler named Finn found himself wandering the cliffside path, drawn by the soft light spinning in the darkness. The village innkeeper had told him of the lighthouse's strange magic, and though he'd laughed it off at the time, he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to see it for himself. The light seemed to call to him, its glow soft and steady, like a heartbeat in the night. As he approached, he could hear the gentle rush of the waves below, their rhythm soothing and constant. He found a spot at the edge of the cliff, close enough to feel the mist from the sea, and sat down, letting the sound wash over him. The lighthouse beams swept across the water, casting a warm, comforting glow that seemed to reach deep into his mind, clearing away his thoughts. For a while he simply sat in silence, watching the light and listening to the waves. Slowly, he felt himself relaxing, his muscles loosening, his breathing slowing. There was something hypnotic about the way the light moved, each sweep like a gentle lullaby guiding him closer to sleep. The night was calm, the air cool, and he felt as though the lighthouse was watching over him, a silent guardian of his peace. As his eyes grew heavy, Finn thought he heard a faint hum in the distance, a sound that blended with the waves and the wind. It was soft, barely there, like a song just out of reach. He let it surround him, the melody soothing and gentle, its rhythm syncing with the beam of light that continued to turn, steady and constant. Soon, Finn lay back on the soft grass, gazing up at the stars that seemed to dance in time with the light. The hum grew quieter, fading into the background, but the lighthouse's glow remained, wrapping him in warmth. His eyelids drooped, his thoughts drifting like leaves on a gentle current, and he felt himself slipping into sleep. In his dreams, he wandered along the shore, the lighthouse a comforting presence in the distance. The hum of the waves filled his mind, and he felt a deep, unexplainable peace. He floated through his dreams, the light always guiding him, a beacon of safety and calm. When he finally awoke, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon, and the lighthouse stood silent, its beam now dim. Finn felt rested, a quiet contentment filling his heart. As he walked back to the village, he carried with him a feeling of peace, a memory of the light that had watched over him through the night. The people of the village knew he had felt the magic of the lighthouse, and they smiled knowingly as he passed by. Finn would never forget that night, nor the gentle light that had cradled him in its embrace, guiding him into the deepest, most restful sleep of his life. Story 3. The Mirror's Secret. Long ago, there was an old mansion hidden away in a dense forest, a place that had been left to ruin for decades. The townsfolk rarely ventured near it, whispering that something watched from the dusty windows. Some said it was haunted, while others claimed it was simply a forgotten relic of a time long past. But everyone agreed on one thing: the mansion was home to something that no one should disturb. One late autumn night, a woman named Rose found herself lost in the woods. She had taken a wrong turn while hiking, and after hours of wandering, stumbled upon the mansion as dusk was falling. The shadows grew long, and the air around her seemed to grow colder. Her heart raced, but there was no choice. She needed shelter for the night. Stepping inside, she found the mansion eerily quiet, with the faint scent of dust and decay filling the air. Rose ventured through the dark halls, her footsteps echoing softly. It was then that she saw it, an ornate, full-length mirror, framed in tarnished silver, standing alone at the end of a hallway. Despite the thick layer of dust on everything else, the mirror's surface was spotless, gleaming in the dim light. She felt strangely drawn to it, as if it was calling her closer, and found herself walking toward it, her mind growing quiet. As she stood before the mirror, she noticed something odd. Her reflection seemed different. The figure in the glass was her, yet there was something in her eyes, a darkness that didn't belong. She shivered, stepping back, but as she turned to walk away, the reflection didn't move. It stood there, staring, a faint smile spreading across its face. Fear prickled her skin, but exhaustion weighed on her even more heavily. She found a room nearby with an old, creaky bed and decided to sleep. As she drifted off, she thought she heard soft footsteps outside her door, a faint whisper that seemed to echo from the hallway where the mirror stood. It was almost like a lullaby, gentle yet unsettling. In her dreams, Rose saw herself standing before the mirror again, but this time her reflection was reaching out, as if to pull her in. She felt her body grow heavy, her limbs sinking deeper into sleep. The reflection's eyes were cold, almost hollow, and as she watched, it stepped forward, crossing the boundary of the glass, entering her world. She awoke with a start, heart racing, only to find herself alone. But when she looked around, she noticed something strange. Her hands were pale, her skin almost translucent. She stood up, rushing to the mirror in the hallway, and froze as she saw her reflection smiling back a smile that wasn't hers. She reached out, and her hand passed through the glass, as if it were water. As dawn broke, the old mirror stood silent in the hallway, the surface smooth and undisturbed. Outside, the forest was still. No one would know that the woman who'd wandered in was now lost in the world beyond the glass, her reflection free to roam as it pleased. Story 4. The Midnight Bell. In a small, forgotten village, there was an abandoned church that locals avoided after dark. The church bell, old and rusted, hadn't rung in years. Yet every so often, at the stroke of midnight, townsfolk claimed they heard it toll a single haunting note that echoed through the empty streets. Some said it was the spirit of the old bellkeeper, watching over the village even in death. One night, a traveler named Evan arrived, unfamiliar with the stories of the midnight bell. He settled into an inn on the edge of town, his room facing the church in the distance. The night was calm, but as midnight approached, he felt an odd chill. The air seemed to grow heavier, the shadows darker, and just as he began to drift into sleep, he heard it, a single, deep toll that echoed through the stillness. The sound was unsettling, resonating deep in his chest. Intrigued, he dressed quickly and made his way to the church, drawn to the sound like a moth to flame. As he approached, the bell tower loomed overhead, its silhouette sharp against the dark sky. The doors creaked open as he entered, the air inside cold and stale, filled with the scent of damp stone. Evan climbed the narrow staircase leading up to the bell tower, each step echoing in the hollow silence. At the top, he found the bell, covered in cobwebs, its bronze surface tarnished and still. He reached out, brushing his hand along the edge, and felt a chill run through him. For a moment, he thought he saw something move, a shadow shifting in the corner of his eye. Then he heard it. A soft whisper, growing louder, filling the empty tower. It was as if voices were rising from the darkness, each one pleading, their words jumbled and broken. He froze, the hairs on his neck prickling. The bell began to sway gently, though there was no wind, and he watched in horror as it swung, releasing a low, mournful toll that vibrated through the night. The sound seemed to drain the warmth from his body, leaving him cold and weak. The whispers grew louder, surrounding him, pressing in on all sides. He staggered, clutching his head, feeling the voices like fingers clawing at his mind. It was then that he realized they were calling his name, each voice desperate, lost. With a surge of panic, he fled down the staircase, the bell's toll echoing behind him. He stumbled out into the night, heart racing, and didn't stop until he reached the safety of his room. But even there, in the stillness, he could feel it, the cold grip of the bell's sound lingering as though it had marked him, leaving a piece of itself within him. The next morning, Evan left the village, vowing never to return. But as he traveled, he began to hear it, the faint toll of a bell, following him wherever he went, a reminder that some places, once entered, never truly let you go. Story 5. The Lake of Shadows. In a remote village, there was a lake surrounded by thick trees and often covered in mist. The villagers avoided it, warning that shadows moved beneath its surface and that the lake had a way of calling people to it, pulling them into its depths. It was said that anyone who looked too long into the lake would see their darkest fears staring back at them. One cold evening, a man named Luke, passing through the village, decided to visit the lake out of curiosity. The mist was thick, curling around the trees and creating an eerie silence that settled heavily over the water. As he reached the shore, He saw that the lake's surface was perfectly still, like a sheet of glass, reflecting the dark sky above. Luke knelt by the edge, staring into the water. For a moment, he thought he saw something moving beneath the surface, a shadow darting through the darkness. He leaned closer, his breath fogging in the chill, and as he did, the shadow took shape and outline that looked just like him, staring back with cold, empty eyes. A chill ran through him, but he couldn't look away. The shadow seemed to rise, coming closer to the surface, its gaze never breaking. He felt as though it were reaching into him, drawing out every fear, every regret. The air around him grew colder, the mist thickening, until he couldn't see anything but his own face staring back from the depths, his expression twisted with dread. Suddenly, he felt a pull, like invisible hands grasping his arms, dragging him closer to the water. He tried to pull back, but the force was relentless. The surface of the lake seemed to ripple, dark hands stretching out, clawing at him. The shadow beneath the water smiled, its expression sinister, as though welcoming him into its depths. With a final surge of strength, Luke broke free, stumbling back from the water's edge, his heart racing. The lake grew still once more, the shadows fading, leaving only his terrified reflection. As he backed away, he could still feel the chill, as though the lake's grip had left a mark on him, a reminder that he'd come too close. In the days that followed, Luke couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. Every time he looked into a mirror or a dark window, he would catch a glimpse of the shadow, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for him to return.